Alastair from Meridian West here. A lot of people have been asking us about what's possible in this new environment. Should we be ploughing ahead as we were before? Should we be suspending our activities? Should we be radically rethinking what we need to do? And so to answer those questions, we are going to be joined by a great panel to kind of tell us a little bit about some of their thinking. But before that, I want to bring in my colleague Ben, who's going to just share some of his thoughts around how client research is changing in this environment, and we're seeing a move towards a more agile model. That's right, Ben.
Yeah, so what I was going to do is just to share with you kind of our experiences and some of our research about kind of client insight in this environment. So the first thing is, as you probably know, we've been doing a poll about the kind of impact of COVID. So we've had a good number of respondents about attendees to the webinar. And we asked this question: if you were leading a firm right now, what would be your top priorities in the next 6 weeks? And what this shows actually is that supporting clients and listening to clients is even more important than just cost reduction or cash flow. So I think what this does is kind of shows that kind of listening to clients, supporting them in this tough time, not just focusing on the internals of getting cost reductions down, the internally focused is critically important. I think many of the partners have been very good at this, picking up the phone, being supportive, but the impression I'm getting is that many have decided to put their sort of client insight programs on hold. I think that's a mistake because, you know, the client needs is changing. Actually, clients often have a bit of time and are very happy to take part in research. And certainly the response rates we're getting are very good, actually. But I think the kind of key thing is making sure that you're kind of adapting the way you're doing client feedback. So that's a traditional model where you have maybe kind of long questionnaires all about service delivery just feels a little tone deaf. So I think the best way forward is to keep it short and sharp, very much focused on how do we kind of help the clients through these changes. I think probably what's more interesting though is what the potential impact could be on client insight. And unlike so many things around COVID, I think it's an accelerator of change. And so I've done this kind of simple model about how we've seen client insight kind of evolve in the professions. So I think you kind of up till about 10 years ago, it was still quite traditional, annual reviews, face-to-face or telephone. All the analysis and setting up the interviews was highly, highly manual. And I think our panelists will concur with that. I think about 10 years ago, the technology really improved and we moved to kind of digital online services. The dashboards have got much, much better. But I think actually there's a real opportunity to move to a much more agile model where rather than a kind of standardized questionnaire which gets sent out to everyone, it's much more of a kind of, and done once a year, it's much more of a kind of pulse type survey because things are changing so quickly. I think there's a real opportunity to use technology, really automate it, and also be much more imaginative about the outputs. So, you know, just to sort of summarize some of our ideas on how we could really capitalize on this issue, I think, yeah, more agile, pulse surveys, fewer of the big kind of annual surveys, make it, see if you can do the interview in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. I think trying to make it more enjoyable and valuable for clients. At the moment, the client really doesn't have much choice about the questions or the agenda. And I think there's no reason why we can't empower the client and say, look, I'm interested in giving feedback on service or how you can help us with technology. And think about the questions, how can we make them more enjoyable? I think also really using the technology, even just in the last year, the technology has really improved. And we've found it that you can use AI to do particularly the kind of absolute bugbear of many professional services, which is the how do we review in-depth interviews. So quite quickly that becomes an overwhelming task. And now the AI can do automatic transcriptions. You can edit them, cut off the interesting pieces that you find interesting, do kind of video or audio clips. It's just terrific and saves a lot of time and also makes the output much more interesting. My kind of fourth idea is kind of break down this quite artificial barrier between thought leadership research and client insight. Typically things don't talk to each other at all. There's no reason why you can't use the client insight to identify the issues that a particular client is interested in. So they might be interested in cybersecurity, for example, and then join them as a community that shares best practice around that issue. So there's a constant dialogue between the thought leadership and the client insight, and also adding some thought leadership questions to the client feedback. So then once they've done the survey, you can then give them a benchmark or piece of insight as thank you for taking part in the client feedback. And I think last but not least is being a lot more creative in terms of the outputs when we use them internally. Very difficult to kind of motivate change with PowerPoint decks. It's a very logical kind of data-driven approach. That works, I think, for the leadership team. But just thinking, how can we create podcasts or video clips that we can then use with staff internally, and really thinking about that almost as much as we do about the research itself, because my sense is that's often an afterthought. So there we are. There's my kind of 5 ideas, a kind of manifesto for using the COVID crisis, and it is a crisis, to really improve things.
Great, thanks, Ben. I think it's a perfect start to the discussion this morning. So as I said, I'm joined by a number of experts in this field to take us through some of their thinking and experiences, what this means for them. Delighted to be joined by Michelle Panayi, who heads up client experience at Thornton, also by Bennison, Director of Marketing Operations at Intertrust, Milan Dalal, who you may remember from one of our earlier virtual breakfasts for Brook Intelligence, and Ben is going to stay in the conversation as well. Those of you with questions, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for that. Ian, I wanted to come to you first, actually, because I know you're relatively new into the role at Intertrust, but you have lots of experience in previous roles leading global client experience, client feedback programs. I wonder if maybe you could start by just telling us a little bit about what you've seen work particularly successfully in some of your past roles, and what learnings you want to bring into your new role at Intertrust.
Thanks, Alastair. Yeah, so I've one of my tasks at Intertrust will be to roll out a client satisfaction program across the 31 countries that we operate in. My previous role was a very similar professional services company called TMF Group. And one of the challenges I had was to get client feedback across 82 countries, and probably between 13 and 14,000 clients on and off. And so it was obvious at the beginning to get some volume and knowledge, and we had to go down an email route. Face to face just wasn't going to be practical, either from a cost point of view or from a speed point of view, because I really needed to find out, and the business needed to find out quickly what the issues were in certain jurisdictions. And I think one of the key learnings I had that I will definitely use here is that I think perhaps I was a little too authoritative or authoritarian at when I first rolled it out, and I felt that the managing directors in the countries felt as though it was being done to them rather than being involved. So I think this time it's about taking people with you on that journey. The technology is easy. The questions, you can work on them, you can amend, you can see what works, what doesn't work. I had a big issue from a cultural perspective as well across 80 countries. Language, I think it was available in 14 languages, our survey at the end. Which is a challenge if you're an MD and you don't speak the language that it's answered in, because that was an issue that we had, that we didn't quite expect the base of the clients in the countries and the languages that sort of the home languages that were used, and then that added another issue. But I think it's not just taking, and it's taking all levels with you. And I had to use different tactics with each. So it was really key that we got Exco with us, and I think we virtually did quite early on, although they were a bit less, let's say, engaged as we came down to putting things right and fixing things, because some of them came with a cost ticket, and that was a little bit of a challenge as well. MDs were a big one for me, because obviously everything ran through them in the countries. So to get them on board, and this was a company that didn't have a lot of client culture. So I think there was a lot of fear originally about, I'm exposing what my potential problems are in my country to the whole of the business, especially to the executive committee. So, I spent a lot of time with each MD virtually at the beginning, talking about the reasons we were doing it, the benefits they would get from it. And then each year we just evolved it, and we just, changed the questions. We brought in very quickly closing the loop methodology that the guys were expected to follow up on even average. It went from average all the way. I think we started at poor and very poor, and then even average we asked for follow up later on. So and then the final level was the actual people doing the work, because we had a few problems culturally as well, that a lot of, particularly in Asia, bad feedback wasn't shared downwards into the team. So, when you try to put things right and change culture, if the people who are doing the work don't know what the issues are, it adds a level of complexity. So I think, without me talking for hours, which I probably could, I think communication is the big one. It really is about, at all those different levels, keeping your stakeholders engaged and making sure that one, that everyone follows up, two, that they understand why we're doing it and what the benefits are, and then keeping that continuous learning all the way through. Because as we all know, you never fix this. The gateposts or the goalposts move all the time. So just as you think you've made an improvement, the benchmark goes up and you're starting all over again. So that would be my big takeout that I'll try and bring into my new role.
Fantastic, Ian. I think we'll probably come back to a number of those points there, but I just want to bring in Michelle as well, because obviously at Grant Thornton, I know you have a kind of fairly long-standing program, but I'm interested to hear, particularly over the last couple of weeks and months, what changes, if any, you've had to make.
Yeah, thanks, Alastair, and good morning, everyone. So as Alastair said, we have had a really long-standing client relationship program at Grant Thornton, and we've been really, really fortunate over the last year to implement new technology that allows us not just to speak to clients at the end of a particular transaction, but to pulse check them across the whole of the client journey. So in many ways, we were fortunate with the technology that we have in place already, and we have made a number of changes to our program along the way, just to make sure that we're really thinking about the times that we're in. I think what's really, really important, and Ben touched on this earlier, is that we think that now more than ever, client listening is really, really important. I think we've been really sensitive. We put a sensitive pause on the traditional relationships, so the relationship checks. So rather than talking to clients about, how we've delivered to them in the past, when we know that they're thinking about completely different things at the moment, it's just we were just really sensitive to that. But what we have done is we have moved to doing a client pulse checks. So 3 or 4 quick fire questions. What's going on at the moment? Are we delivering how you need us to be delivering at the moment? But with the technology that we have in place, we're able to ask 5 or 6 questions to make sure that we're giving our clients exactly what it is that they need right now, but also move to an opportunity that they can answer further questions around some themes, which then means that we can offer them some benchmarking at the end. One thing that we're finding at the moment is our clients are telling us that they are wanting to be put together with like-minded individuals, people in their industry, people in their sector that are going through certain things. So as a result of listening to them, we've acted on that, and we pulled together some webinars for our clients all around different themes around COVID-19 as well. So that seems to be going down really well. So I guess just thinking about it, really maintaining more frequent conversations, more frequent channels to have conversations with clients is more important now. With the face-to-face reviews that we've done really recently, our clients have really valued the time that we've put in for them, and they've said that they found it really useful to pause and stop and to think. But even with those face-to-face reviews, they're not the way that we would traditionally do them. So we have asked clients to tell us what's on their mind, what's on their agenda. So we still want to give you senior time to talk about how things have been going, but we also want that time to be really relevant and valued to you. So we've asked the client to help us to shape those agendas before we go out to visit them, and that seems to be going down really well. And I think just to finish that off, I think we've taken a lot of learnings from this situation now that we will definitely be putting forward going forward. It's about the tone of language that we use with our clients is about really genuinely being empathetic, and so we've built a lot of what we've learnt now into our ongoing program as well going forward.
Mm-hmm. And Ian was talking a lot about communication, engagement, buy-in. What's been your experience, Michelle, about your internal audience, the partners and the other people in the business? Have they been more engaged or less engaged? Given it's harder to walk over to someone's desk these days and chase them up about the clients that they're not submitting or they're not following up on as part of the program.
Well, I recognise the stats that Ben put up really early on in terms of what's most important. We've had lots of internal pulse checks as well with our people, and the thing that our partners and our client teams fear the most is making sure that our clients are okay. So even there's been a real shift in what people wanting to prioritize speaking to clients. So giving them the tools and the guidance to enable them to do that in a really robust way has been really useful. I guess what the other two things that we've done internally to ensure that our people remain really engaged is that for every success story that we're hearing in the way that we've been helping and supporting our clients or great things that our clients are doing, we've been publicising that on the intranet on a daily basis. So not just from our program, but we're getting our partners to really think about what the successes have been so that we can continue that real key momentum. And then the second thing that we've been doing is, our board have always been really prioritising client feedback, and in particular most recently. And the other thing that our board members are doing is reaching out back to the client teams who have had feedback from their clients and really congratulating them for going out to speak to clients and for the work that they've been doing. So closing the loop internally with our client teams that are going out and successfully having these robust independent conversations, and knowing that the board are really positive about that has helped our people to encourage them to want to do that more as well.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And Ben, actually, maybe just picking up with you, because Michelle was talking there about some of the kind of more in-depth activity that would have formed a kind of key part of the program. I'm just wondering, from your experience over the last few weeks and months, how has it been possible, if at all, to replicate some of that with technology? Doing things like Teams and Zoom to capture those more in-depth pieces of feedback. Is that working well? Is that something you see we're going to see more of going forward, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. So, traditionally, if we've done in-depth interviews, we either did them on the telephone or face-to-face. We've been doing a lot more with Zoom. And there's lots of kind of practical advantages of that. It's better to build rapport with the respondents. Just a simple thing like if you're recording it, the audio quality is much better. And the other thing which we're doing, this is on Thought Leadership Project, is actually kind of recording the interview, obviously with the respondents' kind of permission. But then you take that kind of video recording, edit it, and you can then create really nice short video clips of the clients talking about their issues. And I think I'm really excited about that, because I think that's a great internal engagement tool. Because I've seen it when you present back to clients, you can have a 50, lots and lots of slides, and then you do a video at the end, and suddenly it kind of has an emotional impact that however beautiful the PowerPoint slide just doesn't have. And once you've got that kind of collection of little video clips, you can use it to illustrate pretty much any theme you like. You need to be certain on price, and you can use it in training. So yeah, I kind of something we've sort of discovered over the last month or so, but I'm really excited by it.
Mm-hmm. So it's that fifth commandment in your manifesto about using different ways of using the output to actually engage, and video interviews provide a new tool to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and also there's some really good technology that automatically it really helps with the editing of those videos. So something which used to take hours to do, you can now do in half an hour.
Mm-hmm. Milan, maybe we could bring you in here because we've been talking at the moment about speaking directly to clients, client feedback, client listening, but a lot of the work that you do is around supplementing that with broader market intelligence, market insight. I wonder if you could just say a little bit about the kinds of information your clients are looking for, and how that supplements the kind of activity that Ian and Michelle and Ben have been talking about.
I think in the main, one of the things we're finding is a lot of people are doing it around sectors. So we've done a couple of pieces recently where they're saying our certain sectors a complete write-off, and I'll give you a practical example. One was aviation, where although we know aviation is very much in the doldrums, it's very well documented. One of the interesting things I found when we were looking at that is there's going to be plenty of opportunity, say, around consolidation. So the big prediction is that once we get out of this difficult period, all the weaker airlines are probably going to be swallowed up by a lot of the major players. So there are aspects of silver linings throughout this. One of the things I also looked at is is what kind of sources people can look at. Now, it's a little bit different for us because we do this for a living, so we have access to a number of subscription sources, but that's not to say people don't have access to those in-house as well. So one of the things I would definitely say is do look at the company's accounts, do definitely look at broker reports. They give a lot of insight where you can get hold of them. But one of the things that everyone can do, particularly for listed companies, is, and I was looking at this yesterday, is all listed companies are now having to provide trading updates in light of COVID. So there's an obligation to the market. And I looked at half a dozen yesterday. Now, the reason for doing all of this is to say, I hear what people are saying is doing pulse checks and going out to clients and saying, tell us about your issues, what more can we be doing? But the point of background research is always giving you some extra hooks for conversation. So rather than taking that passive approach, you can actually, I always find if you put in the right questions, the FD you're talking to, the GC, will suddenly open up and have a much more kind of empathetic conversation with you. So as an example, I'm sort of looking down at my screen, but I ran off some statistics yesterday from a financial database looking at companies' house data. So I looked at companies for their last financial year accounts, albeit, and it's really looking at those that were in trouble going into COVID. So I looked at those who were making a loss in the last year. I looked at those who had a very poor liquidity ratio, i.e. that's their ability to pay current liabilities in the short term, and the gearing ratio. And I was looking for companies who are highly geared, i.e. they've got more borrowings and they've got funded from shareholders' funds. As a really good example was McNichols PLC, the kind of high street people like W.A. Smith, effectively. Now, they ended their year in November, so it's quite recent. And the point is, if you're having a conversation with McNichols, you've got all this information armed, and you can have a much better conversation. So what came through was they've got a debt of £95 million. They made a loss last year of about 100 million. Their EBITDA ratio is 2.3%. So i.e. they're virtually making no money. They're almost bankrupt, one could say. They've got a liquidity ratio of 0.3, which means they're in a really poor position to meet current liabilities, given the current situation. And they're geared up to over 400%, nearly 400%. So anything over 50 is considered bad. What that means is they're very constrained in terms of getting extra borrowing. And they've got 19,300 employees. So it's not a good picture. So what I'm saying is if somebody like Nichols you're having that pulse check with, rather than just saying, tell us about you, you're probably going in there saying, we understand you've got a high number of employees, and you can have those candid, almost kind of off the record conversations and saying, I'd be brutally honest, I can't believe coming out of the furlough scheme in August when the government expects partial contributions, they aren't going to announce redundancies. That's my gut instinct looking at those numbers. They've already announced they're going to shut 300 shops. That was before we went into lockdown. So almost certainly they're going to have trouble getting the valuations in those shops. They're going to be trying to renegotiate leases, for example. So as well as doing those pulse checks, I think the point of the desk research is you can do quite a lot in the background and say to somebody like McNichols, if I take that as a case study, are you going to be making redundancies? Can we be talking to you about this? what is your borrowing at the minute? You're highly leveraged anyway, you're geared. So how are you going to restructure that refinancing? So the point of desk research is, I think, it gives you the opportunity to have slightly more tailored conversations. And as I always say, is drop in those hooks of conversation. And I think you'll have a much more robust conversation in terms of how you as an advisor can help.
Mm-hmm. And as well as reading between the lines or between the numbers, as it were, to try and tease out some of those maybe strategic challenges or opportunities.
Yeah.
Are you seeing many firms, albeit the listed ones, in their most recent annual reports or their quarterly updates, are they addressing directly some of the COVID-19 implications for their business now?
They are. So I looked at half a dozen yesterday. Now, all without exception, they all said we're not making any 2020 forecasts. So that's not helpful for us, but that's the reality of it. They're all addressing what are we doing for our staff, what are we doing for our clients in terms of safety. That's like a boilerplate statement. But yes, they are. So for example, I was looking at Diageo yesterday. Now they're seeing a real uptick in China, for example. Europe, because of the lockdown, they're really struggling. One property developer whose name escapes me, but they do mainly shopping centers. Now they said they've collected most of their rents up to like 67% up to the end of March. But what really stood out for me was they said April will be the telling time since we've been the full month lockdown. And they said they're exposed to 70% of their rental from retailers. So yes, they are. They have to tell the market. Now they try not to paint a really dramatic doom and gloom picture because otherwise they'll spook their share price. But you can definitely read between the lines in asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm. Great. And Ian, to come back to you, because you were talking a little bit to kick us off about some of your lessons learned, I guess, from your past experiences. But I'm interested just to hear from you about in this new role at Intertrust. What would you say are some of the kind of key things, key kind of success factors for you for the program? What is it that you're looking to achieve?
So I've got different requirements from the different stakeholders so far, which is going to be a challenge on rolling out an initial program. But it was almost how the last survey rolled out. It was starting at an annual survey, which is never enough. You can't just check in once a year. But I'd started to find key elements like onboarding completion and global accounts iterate in a different way. But I think one of the key things, and it goes back to a thing Ben said and Michelle said as well, is that I don't think I'm going to go in with a regimented set of questions like I did initially, where I want to know every technical aspect of the relationship. I want to build it more in a questioning as though we have a good relationship. Those sort of open questions that I might only have 4 or 5 questions, and give the client the opportunity with the the open text to actually go wherever they want, because I think if you're too directive, you'll get what you get, so to speak. And I thought the points earlier were really good, and I think Michelle's spot on I think we need empathy at the moment, and it's is there anything more that we can do for you? Are we doing everything that you need us to do type of approach? Because I think clients will remember the companies as we come out of this, that they felt supported them, and I think that'll be a key enabler for future relationships.
Particularly, Ben, you mentioned some of the video editing kind of software. I think people are kind of keen to understand particular tools or software that works really well there. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so we've tried a number of kind of these AI-powered transcription services. The one we like the best is called Descript. It's got a T on the end. And basically what you can do is you just take the sound or video file, upload it. It creates a pretty decent transcript, and it can also match to speakers. And the other great thing is it takes out ums and ahs, which can be quite a substantial part, a whole lot. And then what you can do is you can then cut and paste the interesting quotes into a separate folder, and it takes with it the sound file and the video file with it as well. So that's terrific. But you probably then need to put it into a bespoke kind of video editing software to kind of make it look better. So yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I would definitely say, I think, video editing software, there's a lot of, really good, actually fairly cheap software you can get now. You don't necessarily need the very high-end packages that, the kind of experts would use. Filmora is a great one that I use. You can get a license for that for something like 50 quid, and it certainly does everything you need to do. We've had another question come in, kind of picking up on this idea around client engagement, particularly thinking about, how firms, if they are at all, translating some of their activity, things like conferences online. I wonder, Michelle, at GT, obviously, plenty of, seminars, conferences would have happened historically. Has there been any move to try and replicate that digitally, or are you exploring other options?
We're using mainly Teams as our technology for bringing clients together. I think there are a couple of things that we're still learning from that technology. You can break people out into different rooms. You can use the whiteboard technology. You can use the pulse checks to keep people engaged. But critically, we're definitely not doing 2-hour Zoom calls. We're making sure that we keep them short and sharp. That's the key thing for us. I think getting people together for a 2-hour meeting face to face, part of the benefit of that is having them being able to talk to each other and network with each other. But when you're really getting people together to meet each other for the first time, then using the breakout technology in Teams is what we've been doing. But yeah, keep them short and sharp. That's what we've been doing.
Mm-hmm. Ben, what are you seeing on that at all? The kind of use of digital to replicate some of the bigger events, client engagement events that we might have seen?
Yeah, I totally agree with Michelle. Short and sharp. I think keeping pacey. I think is not just a technology, but I think you almost need a kind of journalistic, kind of documentary style of getting, sharing insight. And it's getting that, if you're going to go in broadcast mode, make it really engaging and almost like a storytelling rather than lots and lots of data.
Mm-hmm. We've had a question from Tim just in terms of confirming the names of those software. So there's a couple, I think, that have been mentioned. Ben was talking about Descript. The one I mentioned was Filmora, and we can send links around to those when we send the recording of the webinar. If you've got any more questions, do keep them coming in. Just one question I wanted to pick up with you, Michelle, because you mentioned, I guess, that some of the changes that you've been making recently, are these kind of long-term changes? Do you think for you, is this a new way of doing things going forward, or do you think you're going to be reverting to more face-to-face engagement once we're all able to meet in person more regularly again?
So again, Alastair, I think it really will be driven by our client's agenda. I think that's the biggest learning from all of this, is really making sure that we're not doing something to our clients, but we're doing something that they're really going to get benefit from. So these virtual meetings have been working brilliantly for us and for our clients, actually. We don't have to worry about travel time. They don't have to worry about accommodating us into different meeting rooms. It seems to work perfectly well at the moment. So we don't really have any plans to move that away. What we will be continuing to do is to ask clients what's on their agenda and how they want these to be running, because that ultimately this is about listening to them. So
fantastic, and that's probably a good note on which to wrap things up. So to do so, I'd like to thank again to Ian and Michelle and Milan for your insights, as well as Ben.